He brought another woman home. She once stole another woman's home, pride and peace. But years later, barefoot and broken, she returned to beg at the very gates she once laughed at. What Nyara did next will leave you speechless and remind you why grace always wins. Nyara grew up in the peaceful village of Kombe, where life was simple and everyone knew each other. Her father repaired shoes under the big mango tree near the market, and her mother sold cassava, smiling at every customer. They didn't have much, but their home was filled with love, laughter, and warmth. Nyara was their only child, and they raised her to be kind, respectful, and hardworking. She helped her mother peel cassava in the mornings and always greeted elders with a bow. People in Kombe admired her manners and often said she would make a wonderful wife someday. One day, while Nyara was helping her mother at the market, Kalume walked by. He was the only son of a wealthy merchant, known for his charm and fine clothes. Everyone in the village knew his name. Kalume stopped in front of Nyara's stall, smiled at her, and bought more cassava than he needed. From that day, he kept returning, sometimes buying, sometimes just watching her work. Whispers started spreading in Kombe. The merchant's son had fallen for the shoemaker's daughter. Weeks passed, and then one evening, Kalume came to Nyara's home with his father and uncles. He wanted to marry her. Her parents were shocked, but also overjoyed. A simple village girl marrying into one of the richest families. It felt like a dream. The neighbors came with gifts, drums were played, and even the village elder said, "This union will bring blessings." Nyara's mother pulled her aside that night and said softly, "You've caught a rare man. Treat him well." Nyara believed she was lucky. Kalume treated her gently at first. He brought her new clothes, laughed at her jokes, and promised to build her a big house someday. She felt special. The wedding was grand. Guests came from neighboring villages. There was dancing till midnight, and Nyara wore a bright blue wrapper her mother had saved for years. As she sat beside Kalume that night, smiling at the cheers, she thought her life had truly begun. But soon after the wedding, small things began to change. Kalume stayed out longer. He no longer laughed like before. He didn't compliment her food. He started snapping at her over little things. Nyara told herself he was just tired from work. She cooked better meals, cleaned more, smiled even when it hurt, all to keep her marriage strong. She remembered what her mother had taught her. A woman holds the home together, so she kept holding on. The villagers still saw them as the perfect couple, and Nyara didn't want to ruin that image. Whenever anyone asked how she was doing, she smiled and said, "We are happy," but deep down, something felt wrong. Kalume's eyes no longer lit up when he saw her, and one day, without warning, that quiet fear in Nyara's heart turned into reality. A storm she never expected was about to enter her home. After the wedding, Nyara expected love, laughter, and companionship, but instead, silence filled the air. Kalume changed almost immediately. The man who once brought her cassava and called her beautiful now barely looked at her. He stopped talking kindly. His eyes grew distant. He didn't care if she smiled, cried, or stayed silent. He became a stranger in their home, a man she didn't recognize. Nyara took it all quietly. She swept the compound every morning before the sun rose. She fetched water from the stream, even when her back ached. She sold vegetables in the hot sun and used the money to buy food Kalume liked, hoping a warm meal might soften his heart. But no matter what she did, it was never enough. He criticized her cooking, ignored her greetings, and stayed out late most nights. Still, she didn't complain. Maybe he's stressed, she told herself. Marriage takes time. She remembered her mother's words about being patient, about making sacrifices. So she worked harder, stayed silent, and smiled when others asked how she was. Everyone in the village still thought they were the perfect couple. Only Nyara knew the truth behind the closed doors. Then, one night, everything changed. It was late, past midnight. Nyara had waited up for Kalume with food on the table. The lantern flickered as she dozed off in her chair. Suddenly, the sound of the gate creaking open jolted her awake. Her heart lifted for a moment. Maybe tonight he'd come home with an apology. Maybe he'd smile like before. But what she saw stole the air from her lungs. Kalume walked in, arm in arm with another woman. She was younger, dressed in a bold red dress, and wore expensive jewelry. She didn't even look surprised to see Nyara. In fact, she smirked. Kalume didn't say a word. He walked past Nyara like she was invisible, guiding the woman straight into the bedroom Nyara once called hers. Nyara stood frozen. Her hands trembled. Her heart raced. She felt like the ground beneath her feet had vanished. She wanted to scream, to cry, to ask him why, but no words came out. She just stared at the door he had shut in her face. Minutes felt like hours. She finally sat down, staring at the untouched food on the table. Her chest burned with betrayal, but her eyes stayed dry. Somewhere inside, she had feared this day might come, but nothing prepared her for how cruel it would feel. She spent the night outside, sitting on the wooden bench under the stars, alone, rejected, forgotten. As the cold air brushed her skin, one truth became clear. The man she married had no love left for her, and now, she wasn't just a wife doing all the work. She had become the servant to a husband and his new woman. The morning after that painful night, Kaloum stood in the center of the compound like nothing had happened. Nyara watched him from a corner, her eyes heavy from a sleepless night. Then he spoke, loud and clear. "Her name is Rua," he said, gesturing toward the bold woman beside him. "She's my second wife now. Learn to share." His voice was cold, final, and without a trace of guilt. Nyara didn't respond. She couldn't. Her lips trembled, but her heart broke in silence. She felt a sharp stab in her chest, like the ground had cracked beneath her feet. All she had sacrificed, all the pain she had swallowed, had led to this. She wanted to ask why, but Kaloum had already walked away. Rua wasted no time showing who she was. She strutted around the house like a queen, her heels clicking louder than her voice. She criticized everything Nyara did, from how she swept the floor to how she cooked the soup. She laughed loudly, mocked Nyara's simple clothes, and called her the house help. Kaloum never stopped her. He watched silently. Sometimes he even smiled at Rua's insults. One afternoon, Rua came into the room where Nyara kept her belongings, tossed Nyara's wrapper to the floor, and shouted, "This is my room now." Nyara stood quietly, her hands folded, holding back tears. Kaloum walked in just then. Nyara looked at him, hoping for protection, hoping he'd say something, anything. He looked at Rua, then nodded in agreement. That nod crushed Nyara more than any word ever could. Nyara's things were thrown out, her clothes, her wrapper, even her small mirror. Rua laughed as she spread her perfume in the room. That night, Nyara had nowhere to go. The bedroom she once shared with her husband was no longer hers. Kaloum didn't ask where she'd sleep. Rua didn't care. So Nyara picked up her mat and quietly laid it down in the kitchen. As the wind whispered outside and the kitchen grew cold, she wrapped herself with an old shawl and lay on the hard floor. Her back ached, her heart ached more. Just days ago, she was the bride everyone admired. Now, she was nothing but a shadow in her own home. In the silence of the kitchen, Nyara stared at the ceiling and asked herself what she had done to deserve this. But no answer came. Only the sound of Rua's loud laughter from the bedroom that used to be hers. She closed her eyes and let the tears flow, silent and warm. No one saw, no one cared. The woman who once walked with grace and pride in the village was now sleeping beside firewood and old pots. Not because she failed, but because the man she loved had turned her into a servant, and the home she built had become a stranger's palace. Each day in that house became heavier for Nyara. She woke before dawn to start the fire, swept the compound while the others still slept, and cooked 3 meals a day, not just for Kaloum, but for Rua too. She washed their clothes by the stream, scrubbing the stains with aching hands, then rushed back to polish Kaloum's shoes before he left. Not once did he say thank you. Not once did he even look at her with kindness. Rua was worse. She would throw dirty clothes on the floor and order Nyara to wash them again, even if they were already clean. She spat near her feet, rolled her eyes, and called her names like useless goat or dried leaf. Sometimes she would eat the food Nyara made and deliberately throw the rest on the ground, saying it tasted like mud. Kaloum never stopped her. He only laughed, sometimes adding his own cruel words. "Maybe you were only made to serve," he told Nyara once as she knelt to pick up spilled soup. "You're good at it." Nyara never answered back. Her lips stayed closed, but her heart screamed every night. Her pride was torn. Her soul was bruised. But she remembered her mother's voice, the one that always whispered wisdom. Strength isn't in shouting. It's in standing while others try to knock you down. So she kept standing, silent, steady, and strong. When she walked to the market, the villagers stared. They whispered behind her back, hands covering their mouths. They talked about how Kaloum had brought a new wife, how Nyara now served them like a maid. Some pitied her, others simply watched with curiosity, like she was a drama to enjoy. No one offered help, no one stepped in, not even the women who once danced at her wedding. Nyara's father had passed away the year before, and her mother lived in another village, too far to come and see her. So Nyara carried her pain alone. She didn't cry in front of others. She didn't shout or break down. But at night, when the firewood was low and the kitchen was dark, she wept into her shawl, quietly, carefully, like her tears had to ask for permission. The house she once dreamed of as a place of love had become a prison. Every step she took was followed by mockery. Every meal she cooked fed the mouths that cursed her. And still, she endured, not because she was weak, but because she still believed in dignity, in holding herself high, even when treated like dirt. She told herself that storms don't last forever, that one day, all of it, Rua's cruelty, Kalum's betrayal, the whispers of the village, would pass. But until that day came, she kept walking with her head slightly raised, her hands always busy, and her silence louder than all the insults around her. The sun had barely begun to set when Kalum walked in with a smug grin on his face. "The governor's son is visiting tonight," he said, adjusting his collar. "We need everything perfect." Nyara paused, waiting for his next command. "Prepare a full feast, grilled goat, fried plantains, spiced rice. Make it grand. Rua will host at the table." Then his voice turned sharp. "You, clean the outhouse. Make sure it doesn't stink." Nyara's heart sank, but she said nothing. She bowed slightly and walked away. Her hands got to work, scrubbing floors, cleaning corners, chopping vegetables, seasoning meat, all while Rua sat and painted her nails. Nyara cooked with precision, pouring every ounce of her strength into the meal. Even though she wouldn't be allowed near the table, she made sure the food tasted like royalty had ordered it. When the governor's son arrived, the compound sparkled. Laughter echoed from the front yard as Rua giggled and flirted, dressed in Nyara's old wrapper. Kalume bragged about his wealth and how he handled both his wives. Meanwhile, Nyara was behind the house, scrubbing the outhouse floor, her hands stinging from the harsh soap. But then something strange happened. Nyara stepped inside briefly to bring out more food trays. As she moved silently through the house with a bowl of pepper stew, the governor's son looked up. Their eyes met. For a second, everything else faded. He didn't look at her with pity. He didn't sneer like Kalum. His gaze held something different, something sharper, deeper, recognition. He watched her like he knew she didn't belong there, like he saw the strength hidden under her silence. His eyes didn't move when Rua spoke. Instead, they followed Nyara's every step. Nyara felt it. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. Something inside her, long buried, stirred again. Her shoulders straightened slightly. Her eyes, once lowered, lifted just a bit. She returned to the back, heart racing. That one look had done what months of cruelty couldn't. It reminded her of who she used to be. Not a maid, not a shadow. She was Nyara, the girl raised with love, the girl who once dreamed big, the girl whose fire hadn't died, just dimmed. As the feast carried on, Nyara stayed out of sight, but her mind was no longer filled with pain. That spark in the governor's son's eyes lit something new in her, not hope in him, but in herself. She realized she was not invisible, she was not forgotten, and more than anything, she wasn't done. She cleaned that outhouse, yes, but in her heart, she had already begun to rise, not with noise, not with revenge, but with quiet purpose. Something had changed, something small, but powerful. It was the beginning of her return. The entire village of Kombe buzzed with excitement. The Zuweni Harvest Festival had finally arrived, a day filled with music, dance, laughter, and honor. It was the biggest event of the year, and this time, the governor's son, Mosi, would attend in person. More than that, he would choose one woman to receive the royal favor of virtue, a title given to a woman of strength, dignity, and character. Whispers filled the air. Everyone believed Rua would win. After all, she was Kaluma's favorite, bold, loud, and always dressed to impress. That morning, Rua painted her face and wore gold fabric that shimmered under the sun. She paraded through the compound like a queen, ignoring Nyara, who quietly tied on a simple brown wrapper. Nyara didn't plan to attend the ceremony, but Kalum ordered her to serve palm wine at the festival. "Make yourself useful," he barked. So, with a calabash in hand and bare feet, Nyara walked among the guests, offering drinks and avoiding attention. But as she moved through the crowd, Mosi arrived, dressed in a royal tunic, his presence commanding. The crowd grew silent. The drums slowed. Every eye turned to him. He stood tall, with the village chief beside him, ready to announce the woman of virtue. Rua stepped forward confidently, already smiling, her head slightly bowed in false humility. Women around her adjusted their wrappers, waiting to be called. But Mosey didn't stop near them. He walked slowly, past Rua, past the chief's daughter, past every finely dressed woman. The silence deepened. Then he stopped, right in front of Nyara. She had just finished pouring palm wine for an elder, and didn't even realize he was standing there until the crowd gasped. She turned slowly, her hands shaking. Mosey looked her in the eye and said clearly, "This is the woman I've been searching for." Gasps, murmurs. A woman dropped her fan. Kalum's jaw tightened. Rua's eyes burned with disbelief. But Mosey continued, lifting Nyara's hand gently. "She doesn't wear gold. She doesn't shout, but she carries grace in her silence and strength in her steps." Nyara stood frozen, unable to speak, but her heart raced. For the first time, she wasn't overlooked, mocked, or stepped on. She was seen, fully, publicly, and with honor. The chief nodded in agreement. The crowd slowly began to clap, then cheer. Kalum looked like he'd swallowed hot pepper. Rua stormed off, but Nyara, she stood tall, tears in her eyes, but not from pain, from relief, from recognition, from the beginning of something new. That day, the woman once forced to clean outhouses stood before the village as a symbol of quiet strength. The same woman mocked and mistreated now held the favor of royalty, and in that moment, the fire inside her no longer flickered, it blazed. The very next morning, after the shock of the festival still hung in the air like thick smoke, Mosey returned to Kombe. This time, not as a guest, but in full royal robes, flanked by guards and a golden seal. Villagers gathered again, murmuring with confusion. What was happening? Why had the governor's son come back so soon? Mosey stood tall before the crowd and removed the crimson sash from his shoulder, revealing the hidden crest of Zuberi Court, a royal seal unknown to many in Kombe. Gasps echoed. Zuberi Court was not just a royal council, it was the highest authority in the land, above governors and chiefs, a kingdom where wisdom mattered more than gold or name. And Mosey wasn't just the governor's son. He was one of the masked judges, those who traveled in disguise, seeking those worthy of leadership, not by wealth, but by heart. "I didn't come here just for the festival," Mosey said clearly. "I came to see something real. I've watched Nyara from the shadows, not just last night, but for many moons. The way she endures, how she serves without complaint, how she carries herself with quiet dignity. That is power." Kalum stepped forward, laughing nervously. "This is madness. You can't mean my wife, the maid in the kitchen." But Mosey didn't flinch. "Your wife?" he said, turning to him. "You brought another woman to her bed, stripped her of her place, and mocked her. You see weakness, but I saw fire." He turned to the chief of Kombe. "By the authority of Zuberi Court, I appoint Nyara as the head of the Women's Council in Nyara province. She will lead education, commerce, and welfare for the entire region. She will live in the royal estate, and she will answer to no man who treated her like dust." The crowd exploded. Cheers, claps, and stunned faces all around. Rua, who had been sipping palm wine under a parasol, began to cough violently. She spat and wiped her lips in disbelief. "This isn't real," she shouted. "She's nothing." But Nyara stood in silence, her eyes wide but her spine straight. She hadn't asked for any of this. She had never even imagined it, but the world was seeing her now, not as a maid, not as a forgotten wife, but as a woman of power. Kalum had tried to speak again, but this time, the guard stepped forward, blocking him. "You will not go with her," Mosey said sharply. "You lost your right the day you chose cruelty." That afternoon, a royal carriage waited for Nyara. Women from the village wept and clapped as she stepped in, the same feet that once walked barefoot through dust, now climbing into gold-trimmed steps. Rua stood frozen, the world shifting under her. And just like that, the woman once forced to clean outhouses became the voice of hundreds, her dignity finally honored. Kalume thought he had gotten away with everything. He walked around Kombe with pride, believing no one would ever question him. After all, he had power, charm, and connections. But karma has its own way of balancing things. After Mosey appointed Nyara as the head of the Women's Council, he quietly ordered his royal guards to dig deeper into Kalume's dealings. What they found was more shocking than anyone expected. Behind the walls of Kalume's father's store, hidden under floorboards and behind false drawers, were books of records. Not just normal account books, but ledgers filled with lies. Page after page showed money missing, large amounts withdrawn, but no products sold. Goods listed as sold to imaginary customers, receipts with fake names and forged signatures, and all of it linked directly to Kaloum. At first, the guards thought it was just bad bookkeeping, but as they followed the trail, they discovered secret bribes given to village elders and low-ranking officers. The payments were clear: hush money. Kaloum had used stolen funds to silence anyone who might report his illegal second marriage. He wasn't just a bad husband, he was a thief, a fraud. Mosi's lead investigator brought the evidence straight to the governor. It didn't take long before a royal arrest warrant was issued. The next morning, as Kaloum strutted into the village square wearing his usual smug grin, 4 royal guards surrounded him. One grabbed his shoulder. "Kaloum of Kombe," the guard said, "you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and bribery." Kaloum laughed at first. "There must be some mistake," he said, trying to push their hands away. But when he saw the golden seal on the scroll and the stone faces of the guards, his smile disappeared. Rua ran out of their compound, screaming and begging them to stop. But the guards ignored her. The entire village gathered. Some were shocked, others whispered. It was only a matter of time. Kaloum was dragged to the center of the square. The chief stepped forward, trembling. "We trusted you. Your father trusted you." Kaloum tried to speak, but no one listened. His merchant father, who had once proudly called him his heir, arrived moments later. When he saw the proof, he shook his head in shame and turned away without a word. Mosi arrived soon after. He walked up to Kaloum, calm and composed. "When you broke Nyara, you thought you were powerful. But true power is built on honor, not lies." Kaloum was taken to the royal prison in chains. Rua, left alone and humiliated, tried to follow, but no one paid her any attention. Nyara, now far away in the royal estate of Ndera, heard the news with quiet eyes. She didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. She simply whispered, "The truth always finds its voice." And in Komba, the people remembered that a humble heart can survive storms, but a greedy one will always sink. Rua ran barefoot through the dusty streets, her gold bangles clinking, hair wild, voice breaking. "Kaloum, you promised me everything. You said we would rule this village together." Her cries echoed, but Kaloum didn't look back. Shackled and disgraced, he stumbled forward, surrounded by royal guards. Rua grabbed his arm, but he yanked it away. "Get off me! You're nothing without me!" He spat, his face twisted in rage. The villagers who once feared Kaloum now lined the streets, shaking their heads. Some laughed, others whispered, "Look at them now, the mighty have fallen." Just months ago, Rua had strutted around like a queen, insulting anyone who didn't bow to her. She stole Nyara's bed, mocked her pain, and called herself the true wife. But now, her fine clothes were dusty, her pride shattered, and her husband, the man she used to parade, was now a prisoner. No one stepped forward to comfort. No one offered water or shade. The same people she had belittled now watched in silence. A few even turned their backs, as if to erase her from memory. Rua stood in the middle of the road, crying not just for Kaloum, but for herself. She had lost everything, and no one cared. Far away, in the royal estate of Ndera, Nyara stood in a garden filled with blooming hibiscus. She wore a simple royal blue dress, her hair wrapped with silver thread. She looked nothing like the woman who once scrubbed floors and cried in the kitchen. She had become a symbol of quiet strength, and the people loved her. When the news of Kaloum's arrest and Rua's humiliation reached Ndera, the royal council asked Nyara if she wished to speak publicly. She stepped forward with calm grace. The crowd in Ndera waited, holding their breath. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She simply said, "I forgive them." Her voice was steady, full of peace. "But I will never return." Her words moved the crowd, not because they were loud, but because they came from a heart that had healed through pain, not revenge. Nyara could have asked for punishment. She could have demanded that Rua be banished or that Kaloum suffer more. But instead, she chose to release the past. The people cheered, not for her beauty or title, but for her spirit. Children in Ndera began calling her Mama Nyara, a title of honor and love. Even elders who had served in the royal court for decades said, "This one, she was born to lead." And back in Kombe, Rua wandered the village alone, knocking on doors, begging for shelter. But no one opened. No one forgot how she laughed at Nyara's tears. Her gold jewelry meant nothing now. Nyara had no crown on her head, but she walked like royalty. Not because of riches or revenge, but because grace had lifted her higher than hate ever could. The sun was high over the royal gates of Ndera when a woman appeared, her steps weak, her feet bare and dusty from a long, harsh journey. Her wrapper was torn at the edges, barely holding together. Her once beautiful face, now hollow and lined with suffering, carried no pride, only desperation. It was Rua, the same Rua who once walked with gold around her neck and hate in her heart, now looked like a shadow of her former self. She stood at the gates, trembling. The guards frowned, unsure whether to let her speak. But Rua didn't wait. She dropped to her knees right there, pressing her forehead to the ground. "Nyara," she cried, voice dry and cracked from hunger and shame. "Please, I have nothing left. No food, no home. Everyone turned their backs. Help me, even if only with a little water." From the grand courtyard, Nyara appeared, calm, graceful, dressed in a soft lavender gown that caught the wind like silk. She walked with quiet dignity, no crown on her head, yet commanding the presence of a queen. Her eyes landed on the figure kneeling at the gate. For a moment she said nothing. The silence made even the wind pause. Slowly, Nyara stepped forward. She stood on the other side of the gate, face to face with the woman who once mocked her, insulted her, and stole her peace. Rua lifted her eyes, filled with tears. "I was wrong. I was foolish. I let pride and greed destroy me. Forgive me, Nyara, please." Nyara's voice was soft, but steady. "I once had nothing too, Rua. I slept on a mat while you took my bed. I was made to serve while you wore my clothes. But even in pain, I never treated anyone the way you treated me." Rua sobbed, burying her face in her hands. The guards looked away. Servants watching from the windows felt a chill. This was not just a broken woman begging. This was karma, unfolding in silence. Nyara took a breath, her eyes full of calm strength. "I forgive you," she said gently, "but I cannot welcome the past into my present. The woman I was died a long time ago, and I must honor the woman I've become." With that, she turned away, not in anger, not in pride, but in peace. The gates slowly closed behind her, and Rua remained on her knees, hands still reaching, lips trembling with the words she couldn't speak. Inside, life moved on. Birds sang, children laughed in the royal garden, but outside the gate, the world stood still for Rua, alone, forgotten and empty. That day, whispers spread through the kingdom like fire on dry leaves. People spoke in hushed tones, shaking their heads. "Did you see? She came back to beg." But more than Rua's fall, they remembered Nyara's words. And from that day on, a new saying was born in the hearts of the people. Grace may bow, but it never breaks. If this story touched your heart, then take a moment to breathe and think. How many Nyaras do we know around us? Silent fighters, women who endure pain, betrayal, and humiliation, not because they are weak, but because they carry strength the world can't see. Nyara didn't fight with loud words. She fought with grace, with dignity, and with quiet courage. And in the end, her light was so strong, even those who once mocked her had to kneel. Rua's downfall wasn't just karma. It was a lesson that no matter how high you rise by stepping on others, one day you will fall. And when that day comes, it's the people you hurt that will remember, not your beauty, not your pride, but your cruelty. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt like Nyara, unseen, mistreated or broken, let this story remind you, your value does not come from their approval. One day, your truth will shine, and they will wish they had treated you better. And if you've ever acted like Rua or Kalum, maybe it's time to change. Let this story stir something deep inside you. If this touched your soul, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful African stories that teach, heal, and inspire. Thank you for watching. We see you. We honor your journey. Keep standing. Your moment will come.